Pontiac Fiero. You got a Pontiac.
Hi, thanks for checking out this segment of my 3800 build. I think this is another one of those exciting milestone videos that shows I'm coming to the home stretch. In this video, I'm attaching a custom transmission shift bracket and the exhaust system. From there, I'm installing the engine into the car and attaching only the necessary components to do a trial start for a few seconds. Once I hear this baby roar, I can continue installing the engine and filling the fluids. But that portion will be left for a separate video. I hope you find this trial start video exciting and validating to my other videos. Let me know in the comments below what other Fiero videos you'd like to see. And as always, please like, share, and subscribe. Alright, so we're at another milestone. Our first milestone, in my opinion, is when you actually get the engine onto the transmission. The second major milestone is when that whole cradle can actually get fitted into the car. And I think that's where we're at. We're going to do a little bit of minor hookups and touch-ups, but for the most part we're going to try and get it in the car. Some of the minor stuff we're going to take care of is transmission, shift bracket, exhaust, maybe a few other odds and ends. Then we're going to trial fit it in the car and cross our fingers that we get a good start on the first try. So let's take a look. Alright, so if you're doing an automatic transmission, one of the things you need to do is you have to marry some brackets together that bring the transmission cable from the Fiero over to the 4T65E HD from your 3800. Now to do that, we're going to start with our shift lever. As you can see with this, it's a marriage of two pieces. We've got the Fiero component here, 4T65 here, and it's pretty much right down the middle. But I'm going to give you some measurements. I did not do the welding, I did not do the measuring, I didn't do anything. I had someone make this for me. So if you know someone who can weld or you can weld, I'm going to give you some rough numbers that I'm measuring from this, but you may want to search around a little bit to get your own exact measurements, and I'm sure even then every setup is different, so you may have some fine tuning. But from what I'm pulling off of this, going from the center here to the center here, we're looking about 1.25 inches of cutting off the Fiero side of it. On the 4T65, same deal, it's 1.25 inches, giving us a total overall length of 2.5 inches. So if you want a better look at this, kind of gauge it, where it's cut, what it looks like. Notice the angle of the slot in reference to this, so you don't do it backwards. The only other, and when you put it on, it's going to face down, so you're actually going to plug the cable in from the bottom, not from the top. So that is this. I'm going to go ahead and paint this up and get it ready to go. The only other thing I would probably say is Fiero shift cable brackets tend to snap in, and with 30-year-old cars, that plastic's pretty brittle. So if it doesn't stick on, you have two options. What I did is I drilled a hole through the neck of this. I'll stick it on, and I'll stick a cotter pin through it, and that'll hold it on. If you don't want to do that, you can drill out the back here, remove this entirely, and Rodney Dickman sells a better setup that'll keep the shift cable from popping off, and uses a nut and a bolt, and it's much more reliable and long lasting. So I'll leave a link to that in the description if you need that for your shift arm, but that's what we're looking at for the shift arm. Alright, now we're going to look at the shift bracket itself. We're taking the shift bracket from the Fiero, where the cable actually connects in, and mating it to the bracket that mounts to the 4T65 on your 3800. And as you can see, these are welded like so. Now to give you some rough measurements on this, from what I am observing, I'm seeing a 2¼ inch, or on this side, it was a 2¼ inch from here to the end. There is a little bit of an overlap where the weld is, so I'm going to the end. That way you have a little bit of slack to weld. All right, flipping it over, measuring the gap from here to around where it starts to curve, there's a little bit of a line that comes through the bracket here. So I'm measuring basically from that line to the edge, and what I'm coming up with is about a 1/2 inch. So I'm saying from where this line kind of meets at the curve all the way out to the end where it's cut is about a 1/2 inch. And then, as I mentioned a second ago, there is a little bit of an overhang where it's welded together. So what I'm measuring is roughly about 1/8 of an inch. So that'd be the overhang on that. And that's how you get this together. And I think the overall length between the curve here and here is about 3 inches. So these will give you some rough measurements of what you need to strive for. As I mentioned, every car is different, so do some research if you're not 100% sure. Ask around if you can do some welding, tinker with it, and good luck. Alright, I'm going to start working on getting the exhaust together. One of the things I had to pick up, in case you need one, is an exhaust pipe flange ring. This is a Felpro, part number 61009. I'll try and have a link for it below if you need one, and that'll go in between the exhaust pipe and the exhaust manifold. So we'll get this on, we'll get the exhaust pipe on, and then we'll check back. Alright, got the exhaust bolted on. This happens to be a SpinTech exhaust. I'm not sure if they're still in production or not. I got this secondhand off of someone. It is a exhaust system that allows you to keep the trunk. There are some where you have a catalytic converter and you'd have to cut the trunk. This one, no cat, keep the trunk. I did hear at one point Fiero Raj was looking to develop an exhaust system that kind of follow the Fiero's exhaust system. Not sure how far he's gotten on it or if he even still is working on it, but you may have to get some custom exhaust work done, but you can always keep an eye out for a SpinTech, see if you can get your hands on one or see if they still make them. But that's what I used. That's what's installed. I'm going to go ahead and bolt up our transmission brackets. Alright, I've got my shift bracket mounted up. I've got the arm on just finger tight because I'm going to have to take this off to get the cable on. But note the orientation of the bracket does face upside down. Now is as good a time as any to make sure it's in park. Last thing you want to do is kill yourself trying to figure out why it won't start, only to find that maybe it was left in gear. But all the way up is park. I did actually have to put a slight ding in this exhaust guard to get it to clear and go on, but just very mild, and that may just be a one-off for me, or it may not, but just something to note. But those parts are on and ready to go. Alright, we got the engine hoisted up. Let's bolt it in. Alright, got the cradle up. I got the front cradle mount bolts set in place on both sides. We're going to use that as a hinge to hinge the rest of the cradle up and then bolt on the rear. Alright, as you can see, these are the rear cradle mounts. This is where they have to bolt. So all we got to do is use the hoist to lift this up. As I mentioned, the front cradle mounts are used as a hinge to pivot this side up. So mount this up, wire it up, and get some fuel and test it out. Alright, I've got the engine bolted in. The wiring's pretty much there. I've snaked the ECM connectors through. Just want to make a quick note that it does take a little finagling to get these big long connectors through that stock hole, but it is possible, so just work at it. I think I had to tip it up facing up and then kind of squeeze the wires in and just pull it through that way, so it was manageable. Just got to throw an ECM on here and a battery, and then I'm going to do some dry cranks with no fuel, just to get the oil primed and the cylinders lubricated. Then I'll put the fuse back in, hook up the fuel lines, and try a live fire and see if we get a good test start. Alright, so we're down under the car with the starter, just to kind of briefly show what I did for the wiring. We have the purple wire which starts the car. That's from my previous wiring video. We've got the main battery wire here. I have a battery relocation kit, so this runs to the front of the car. So my setup will be a little different than a normal one if you don't have that kit. I ran this wire right to the alternator, and then this one runs up to the power the rest of the car. So let's take a look at something else. Alright, now we're back up here in the car harness on the passenger side. We've got our injection technology wiring harness here, factory Fiero harness here. This is the red wire that's coming up from the starter that I'm running up under to the top screw here, and that powers the whole car. Alright, so we're ready to do our very first test. This is going to be a crank test, just to, one, make sure it cranks, and two, start pumping the oil through the system, lubricating the cylinder walls, and kind of get everything lubricated before I actually hook up the fuel lines and try a live fire. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get a good crank, it'll sound good, and we can move on to fuel lines and a test start. Let's do it. All right, that is definitely a positive sign. Sounds like we're getting compression. We're pumping the oil through. I'll do a couple more cranks, and then we'll go ahead and try and hook up some fuel lines and put the fuel pump fuse back in and cross our fingers. All right, just hooked up the fuel lines. The one on the left, which is a slightly smaller line, this is your return. The slightly thicker line, that's your send. So you get your send, your return, and with these custom transport fuel lines I had made, they just clicked in. I do believe you need a special tool to remove them. You stick down in there to unclick the pins that hold it in. So try and make sure that you're pretty confident that you don't need to take your engine back out unless you want to go buy this tool. Just have it on hand to pop out the fuel lines. But feeling pretty good. So far so good. So let's try a live fire. Alright, moment of truth. Fuel lines are up. Put the fuse back in. I'm going to try multi-angle. First start. All comes down to this. Fingers crossed. Hopefully I'm as brave as my daughter and I can say, yeah, I got this. Alright, that is positive. Let's go ahead and hook it up. Alright, you just saw me do it, my first test start. That was really exciting. I think I just want to wrap up this video with one more test start, just because this is just so exciting. So let's try one more. man, that is just such a rush. I can't wait to get this thing on the road. So that should do it for this video. I'm gonna go ahead and do the final hookups on this, so definitely stay tuned for my next video. I only want to run it for a couple seconds. I've only got fuel and electrical. There's no coolant, there's no trans fluid, so I only want to run it for a very short bit, just to make sure that I'm hooking up a good engine and everything's good. Everything definitely sounds great. So that should do it for this video. Thank you very much for following me in my journey, and definitely check out the next and final video on my 3800 build. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.